Hi there and welcome to the Torvus podcast. My name is Ari and today I'm going to be joined with Alex and Jason and we're going to be talking about one of the craziest martial art practitioners of all time. It's going to be Steven Seagal, who came out in the 80s with Above the Law. So stay tuned and let's get into it. Obviously, it's the three of us doing the Torvus podcast, Alex, Jason, and myself, and we're going to be talking about Steven Seagal, his aikido, and particularly his first movie, which was Above the Law. And Jason and I have particular memories of that movie because it actually started us out on a martial arts journey. Yeah. So let's go back in time. Okay. So 1988. You remember that, Alex?
No, I was not present.
Okay, he was not present. As in you weren't born?
No, not till 93.
Oh, okay.
Which is what can make this interesting
years.
is getting someone who's seen it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
But interestingly, here, we're going 98 from our previous episode where we did Bloodsport. Also 1988. Great year for martial arts.
It was, and we actually mentioned that in the last podcast. So in 1988, Above the Law comes out. Steven Seagal, he breaks into Hollywood for the first time. He does a martial art which no one had seen before. Obviously, Aikido has been around for many, many years, World War II, pre-World War II. But that was the first time it was seen on film. And Jason and I probably have very similar stories. And I'm going to ask you, Jason, and start with you.
Yeah.
When you saw it for the first time, I mean, we're used to karate films and kung fu films.
Yeah.
What did you think when you saw it?
Oh, I was blown away. I was like, whoa, this stuff is like super cool. It was like, wow, it's like was doing joint locks and throws and stuff. As I alluded to on the Star Trek episode about martial arts, that I was into pro wrestling and Kung Fu type of stuff. And so like the non-strikey stuff, he does a lot of striking too, but that was like the kind of stuff. It's like, whoa. And it was really graphic and like with the bone breaking and the stuff. It was very different than anything else. It was very fresh, like people always trying to do new things in movies and change how things are. I think that movie really stuck out as being something very different than the other martial arts movies.
And one of the great things of that movie, if you remember, the very opening scene is Steven Seagal in his dojo, and he's basically teaching a class, and he's doing the moves in Aikido and throwing and flipping, and the music, which is really kind of Japanese, very cool. Actually, Alex was talking about that too.
Yeah, it was like that 80s like synth kind of intro, but then threw in the Japanese like wood flute and everything like that. It was very cool. I was a huge fan of that.
Yeah, so after he, was throwing people around and breaking bones, I was like, okay, I'm hooked.
Yeah, and that was like, what, 2 minutes? I don't know how long,
Yeah.
but something like 2 minutes or something like that. It's not very long at all. It could even be a minute. It's just like super short, but gets you right in there like, whoa, okay.
So the great thing about today is like we have a perspective of Jason and I that go back many years and remember the film in theaters type of thing. And then we have you, Alex, who, have seen it basically not in the movie theater and you weren't born when it came out. So your perspective is different. And you know a different Steven Seagal.
Oh, yes.
How you were introduced to him than we know initially. Yeah. Like when we were introduced to Steven Seagal, he was like, this is the badass action hero. And then years later, all this ridiculous shit came out.
Crazy guy that used to do martial arts. That's kind of how I knew him, right? So totally different perspective. And then having watched the film after having this like established as this crazy guy, I'm like, this looks like the monster that ate this guy who's playing this movie. Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So
was this the first Steven Seagal movie you've seen, or did you see one of the later ones?
I've seen. I saw one of the later ones too. I've seen in my dad's. We've watched action movies, and I've seen a couple, but this is the first one that I watched actually fully recognizing that it was Steven Seagal, right? Because I didn't know Steven Seagal. I knew he was an actor, but I didn't know him from his acting career. I knew him as a martial arts guy who went nuts and did all this other activism stuff. But he's very contradictory personal life.
So before you even saw any of his things,
I established Steven Seagal. The only way that I knew him was as a very eccentric martial arts practitioner, to put that in a light way.
So you're coming into it from this celebrity kind of
the drama, exactly,
of where that is.
So before we get into kind of the craziness that happened to Mr. Seagal, let's talk about the movie itself.
Yes.
Okay. And then we'll kind of break down the other stuff. So if you're unaware, listening audience, of Above the Law, you should watch it because it is a phenomenal film. I'm sure that most people who listen to the podcast have seen it. because it's required viewing if you're an 80s geek. But the story itself was, was kind of cool. So he was a ex-CIA operative who basically, didn't agree with what was going on within the company, and he left and he became a cop, right?
Yeah.
Nico Toscani. And in Europe, the movie was not called Above Law. It was called Nico. So that was, it was interesting.
Do you know why? I have no idea, but why would
No,
they
I
do
should
that?
I should look that up. But it's funny because they used to joke about Steven Seagal that all his films were 3-word films, right? Above Law, Out for Justice,
Marked for Death,
Marked for
Hard
Death,
to Kill,
Hard to Kill,
right?
right? And
Yeah.
so it was like,
Story itself.
obviously the bad guy in the film is played by a gentleman by the name of Henry Silva. And
Is that the vein guy?
the
The vein in head guy?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Fox.
So he ends up being the main adversary, and obviously throughout the film, Mr. Seagal is able to showcase his aikido by throwing people into grocery shelves and through windows. And,
Hit that guy's store. Not in my store. Not in my store.
yeah, I come to America. Stop.
Yeah.
It was really, and so there's a couple interesting trivia points about Above the Law that I'm going to kind of throw at you guys if you knew. But we know in the opening scene of Above the Law, there's pictures of Steven Seagal. Those are actually him. His baby pictures and stuff.
Oh, really? Yeah, I was talking about it as I was a kid. I was a man at 17. Yeah.
And then he's like, I met this man and this little old man at a baseball game, and then I went to Japan and studied under him. So he had said that he studied under a guy by the name of O-sensei, right? And O-sensei is the founder of Aikido.
Wow.
However, if you look at the timeline of when he was in Japan, so O-sensei died in 1969, I think it was, and I think it was 71. When Seagal went to Japan, so they would have never met.
Right.
But this is part of the whole mystique of
Which gets back again with the blood sport with Frank Dukes, and you have these mythologies of people of what their real story is, and then what the myth that surrounds.
And the funny, it's very true. So the whole Frank Dukes thing we were talking about, obviously in the last podcast, but the interesting stuff is when these martial arts came out and they got picked up by Hollywood, they could make these claims that were impossible to find out.
Yeah, and remember, this is before internet. I mean,
Right.
unless you're really into
Bullshitting was definitely a way of getting your credentials, right? It was
Totally.
hard to prove anything.
Totally.
You just get a piece of paper and put a stamp on it and say, yeah, I got this from somebody, right?
And so only until the advent of the internet and people doing research and stuff and where everyone can see, then all this stuff came out. It's like, oh my God, it's like, this is impossible. He could have never met him. And, he didn't actually do this. And he's never fought in a kumite. And right? So just quite interesting. Steven Seagal actually says he declared that of his first 5 films that he made, that his favorite character was Nico Toscani in Above the Law. He said he absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And there was his partner in it, Pam Grier. She was the female cop.
Yep.
She had said, which I find very funny, she goes, it was one of her favorite movies of all time because it showed off her acting skills.
Oh my god.
that showed off her act. Okay,
Interesting.
Yeah.
good thing I don't know
Fascinating.
actors. That's probably why I don't remember her from anything else.
So here's another really interesting trivia thing. So as I said, Henry Silva is the bad guy in it, the guy with the vein in his head. But Henry Silva actually broke Steven Seagal's nose in the final fight scene.
Really?
Yeah. Seagal was rushed to the hospital, and the next day Seagal was back to work. He stayed up all night icing it so he wouldn't get 2 black eyes from it.
Wow.
Yeah. It's funny, before getting the part, Steven Seagal, he had to demonstrate his martial art prowess to the producers of the film. And so what he did is he physically dominated his students, which he normally does if you see the opening scenes. And it apparently it terrified the executives, the producers of the film. They didn't know it was staged.
Wow.
Because they had never seen Aikido before.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Kodagaish and the
and there's-
Rimanages and all those
No,
things.
and when at the time, this is the thing. Like right now, when
Violent.
you see things, and people have seen YouTube and they've seen every movie, even movies that aren't martial arts movies, are chock full of martial arts and stuff now.
Yeah.
So back then, it was really eye opening. It was like, whoa, what the heck is this
And
thing?
the UKs are coming in with a lot of momentum, and they're yelling, and it's very vocal, and then it's wham wham, and you just see a flurry of limbs, and then a big smash, and he's standing there like in his Kamai's ready stance as if nothing happened. You're like, how did the guy get from there to down there in a blink
it's
of an eye?
very intimidating.
So if we'll take one particular move in Aikido, which is called an Rimanage, which means entering throw. And that's basically, for those of you who don't know Aikido, that's clotheslining someone, to put it really bluntly.
And you really should see those first 2 minutes or whatever. Even if you don't want to watch the whole movie, you should see that first opening scene there.
So one of the his main student, which he uses, it's a Japanese guy, and he uses him all the time in his movies. He's actually one of the bad guys in the shop with the guys like, I come to America, that guy.
Yes,
His student is in there.
Right, yeah, I thought I looked familiar. Yeah.
And his name escapes me at the moment, but he's yeah.
Guy. He's actually pretty high level, and
he's super high level, but he's also in the opening scene at the dojo.
Right, yeah,
And so he does a Riminagi, an entering throw, and clotheslines him really hard. And again, so the executives look at this and they have no idea that his student can take ukemi or knows how to fall. So all they just see him is get smashed and fall into the mat. And so they're shocked.
Yeah.
And again, it's a new martial art. It's not the same like if you turn towards the camera, I punch you, you turn away. We can tell from a certain angle.
That's literally where they were coming from, that 80s kind of like fake fighting in the Western world, right? Kung Fu had some pretty impressive things for striking and whatnot, but it was still, dummying and or pulling your punches, right? And this is the first one where
Contact.
you don't really have to pull your punches if if there's ukemi, right?
And the funny thing is, if we look at kung fu films, one of the great things they did for kung fu films, and they still use it to this day, is they will cover each of the opponents and the people fighting in flour or dust, because every time you block, dust will come out, and it's a great visual.
Yes,
right.
Or like they'll be chalking up their hands or something before a fight, and then you'll see the fighting, and then whoosh, whoosh, the blocking.
So it was a very neat technique that the old kung fu films picked up, and they still do it, and fantastic. So anyway, Steven Seagal's kicking everyone's ass, and he's doing the Riminagi and smashing. And again, we want to point out it's not only his technique, but it's the technique of the people he's doing it on, that they can receive the technique.
Yeah, because you can't just do this to any standard guy. And the stunt business has probably changed a lot over the years too, because what people are used to taking, it's not the cowboy guys that are used to being knocked off the saloon thing and doing the rollover and fall into the...
And one of his most impressive feats too is the randori, the ability to take on the multiple opponents at once and to do these moves and to quickly be dispatching and having them come back. It makes for an incredible that fight scene. It's so dynamic, and guys they can get back up and they can be rethrown again, and you can be multiple people fighting him instead of just, I punched him in the face and he fell down. It's
But one of the things they did in Above the Law, which they hadn't done in a lot of movies, it happened a few times, but when Steven Seagal would do a move in his action films, it was usually he would do the move and he would break something or kill you, and that would be it. There weren't protracted fight scenes like there were in the other karate movies. It's like, oh my God, they're fighting for like 9 minutes. That's incredible. How many times can you get kicked in the head without you being like, woo?
It's kind of like seeing like the spaghetti westerns after seeing regular westerns, where you've got like that
the quick draw,
things there, but it's like it's that little edgier.
Yeah, that's actually a really good analogy. So you were talking about a former student of his. His name was Michael Ovitz, and he was a former aikido pupil of Seagal's, and so that's who kind of got him into the movie business. He told Seagal that he could make him a movie star, and that's kind of how it started.
Wow!
So I actually remembered something correctly.
Yeah, he did.
Whoa.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing about Above the Law is Steven Seagal personally selected every weapon scene in the film. From the machetes to the handguns.
Even to the salami? Okay.
Doesn't he whack a guy with salami?
Yeah,
he does. Yeah. So good. So throughout the film, again, great fight scenes. And we're going to kind of get into some detail on our favorite fight scenes in there. Not the best story in the world, but again, I would say of all the action films that are out there, I would have to put Above the Law in the top 10 of just kind of changing the culture of action films.
Yeah, and it's an act. It's not a pure martial arts thing. The thing was he was like the martial arts cop kind of thing. And this is sort of Punisher type of era type stuff too, where things are getting that little bit of vigilante type of thing. Like he's a vigilante, he's a cop, and it's kind of like, you're coming also the Dirty Harry type of thing where you're, the kind of cop that's not quite doing things right, but you're still a good guy, but you're doing things the hard way. And
he was framed. They were out to get him, right? And
totally
coming after him, and so he goes on the wrong side of the law to prove that you can't be above the law, right? So
he's hunting you down. I know
and yeah, they've got a thing there, but it's not just a pure martial arts movie. It's a martial arts / cop movie, and it's a little bit different in that way.
And one of the other trivia things on this, I don't know if you guys know, but Steven Seagal actually went on a ride along with Chicago detectives before he did Above Law, because he kind of wanted to get an idea of what it was like.
Interesting.
And it's reported that the Chicago detectives said that Steven Seagal scared the criminals more than the cops did.
Yeah,
No doubt.
Yeah, because you're gonna remember, like, Seagal at the time was probably 35. He's 6'4".
He's a pretty tall guy, yeah.
Right. He's a tall dude. He wasn't a super heavyweight like he is now.
No, so what? Just as a side thing, when you saw him in Above the Law versus, because you're used to seeing the old current him, and you saw the young him, what was your?
It was like William Shatner, like I have the same opinion of that, right? Like William Shatner, that's Captain Kirk. Like, what? Like, it's almost unrecognizable. Like, it's like, oh yeah, if you CGI the hell out of that, you might be able to go back and do that. It seems unreal to me.
Yeah, because I find that really interesting. Is like someoe's first impression. Everyone talks about what first impressions count for and stuff. And when you're coming from the other end of things.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Some of the things that film portrays. I actually have to, now that I'm thinking about it, it's a lot of it's offside, by today's standards.
Yeah, I was watching it. I just watched it just the other day, and it was. I was like, oh, that would not fly, and I was obviously jaded by the stuff that he'd been into, and the seediness that and the drama that he's experienced, kind of that changed how I saw him and the opinions on the things that he was saying and what he was getting away with, right? Like, obviously the culture changes and what's acceptable changes, but it was, you could certainly see how that character would kind of evolve into the person that Steven Seagal became, right? So it was interesting to me to see it almost backwards from how you guys saw it, right?
Yeah.
You guys saw.
Whereas I'm kind of looking at it like being like Bruce Lee meets Dirty Harry, kind of thing, and it's like, okay, what would that kind of?
Now, the funny thing is when people go back and watch Above the Law, because of the comical nature of Steven Seagal now, people are like, meh, they already have something in mind. But it really is a good film for an action film, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, it's not bad for a cop thing. It's like,
there's twists, like it's a good movie. Like, there's not a whole bunch of depth to it. It's not going to win Oscars or anything like that.
There's not great acting. There's not great writing. But it's a good, solid action movie, right?
Yeah, but what it did, like, it's different than like Bloodsport, because Bloodsport is kind of this. It's more of that fantasy, and it's trained by a ninja, and I'm going to Hong Kong and stuff, and so it's different because it's more. It's like it's a cop thriller action film that has martial arts in it.
But it also felt real. So again, like the comics, this is again Punisher type of era where you're not doing your Spider-Man up there, okay, woo kind of stuff. It's like, okay, this guy's like not superhuman, but kind of more than. He has no
superpowers. He's just disciplined and trained, and it shows you where that training becomes a superpower almost, because
it's riding that line there, and that was that again for that era that spoke really to. There was, I don't know what the term for it is, but there was something at that time that was the right thing for that time. That kind of movie came out when it needed to. And
honestly, for me watching it, I'm pretty critical of special effects and that kind of stuff. And it was pretty good. Like, when people were getting punched, they were actually getting bloodied up, which is something you don't really see anymore. Like, oh yeah, this person just got roundhouse kicked in the face, but they're totally fine. They kind of make a quippy thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, no, this guy got punched in the face, his nose is broken, and he's bleeding, and they're fighting, and there's blood. And,
you wouldn't get just the Bruce Lee, you wipe the blood off your face.
It wasn't over the top, but it wasn't non-existent either. Yeah. So I did appreciate that, and there was a couple cool like car fighting scenes where he's on top of a car or on top of a train, and the train's moving. Like, it's not crazy. It doesn't have to be like Die Hard 4 where Bruce Willis is jumping a car into a helicopter. It's like Die Hard 1 where it's just
what year did Die Hard
stuff.
What year did Die Hard 1 come out? That was around the same era.
Yeah, I'm going to say the late 80s as well.
Because that's one we should do too, because that really changed action movies in general. So I don't know if it came out before or after. I just went a little fuzzy.
Die Hard came out in 1988.
What a great year for movies.
Yeah.
But see what I mean? Is so there's no way that it influenced it, because they're coming out at the same time.
Yeah.
Like those are the kind of things that action movies got better because of movies like this. Like this made Above the Law made your standard action, the martial arts part of action stuff a little bit better.
Yeah.
So, and Die Hard, well, we'll get into Die Hard some other day, but don't want to cloudy this too much.
And also, Steven Seagal has some great lines in that movie. Do you remember any that pop out? One of my favorites, I'm going to start it off. So one of my favorites is he walks around the corner after he messes everybody up. And then there's this dude who's like 7 feet tall and like 400 pounds.
Oh, the big guy in the black shirt. Hey, that's my buddy.
It's my buddy. And he's like, I'm not in the mood, right? And then he pushes him. He's like, fuck you, mood man. And then he just punches him right in the sternum.
Plexus,
And it just drops him.
and then he's like, hey, bro, the guy's...
Yeah, and then he goes, what it is.
We'll be cool.
I'm cool. But the line before that, he's basically talking to a guy and he goes, if I find out that you're lying to me, I'll come back and kill you in your own kitchen.
Your own kitchen. That's like, so good, yeah.
Then you chase the guy down after the back alley where the guys jump out of the convertible or whatever at him.
With the machetes and stuff like that.
Yeah, machete and baseball bat. And
then he messes everyone up. Yeah, that was good. And that's when that's his first running scene.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, very good. So, Jason, I'm going to ask you, since you do have a background in the martial art aikido, we know that the internet is not being kind over the years to that art in particular, especially with the advent of MMA and jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. People get very elitist about their arts.
Oh, yeah.
And prior to jiu-jitsu coming out, right, there's always the debate, right? It's like, well, how would aikido do against kung fu? And how would this and that, right? So, again, and especially because of Seagal and other videos that have come out, they're just really brutal. They don't showcase the art. Kind of give me your impression of where the art was back then and how it's morphed to today.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people, like, BJJ is pretty big right now and for the last X many years, but things come in phases where they're the hot thing and stuff. I mean, when you had your Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, you had karate dojos and kung fu dojos were popped up all over the place. That was the thing, because everyone wanted to be like the action heroes of their day.
Right.
And then in 1988, this comes out, and then Aikido. I mean, I know people say a lot of bad things about Steven Seagal, and even in the Aikido world, there's certain negativity towards him, and some people say he helped Aikido, some people say he hurt Aikido, but definitely increased the enrollment a huge amount. Like, Aikido was a hot thing. BJJ was like unknown.
Right.
And Aikido went from unknown. It was kind of like the sort of the darling of the day. For a few years there, it was really popular, and we had tons of people coming in all the time. I mean, well, obviously I was one of them. You were one of them.
Yeah.
Kind of got people in there. So, like I said, it showed in the movie, there was like, whoa, this is something totally different, opened people's eyes to it.
So my question is, when you started Aikido, we had watched these moves, and it's like, I want to learn these moves.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you were practicing Aikido, at any time did you start, this is prior to BJJ.
Yeah.
Did it ever go through your mind of like, what happens if the fight goes to the ground? Or was that just not even part of your worldview?
The ground stuff wasn't really part of my worldview.
You're already fucked up. Your job is to put him on the ground, not be on the ground.
Yeah, it wasn't really a consideration there. In high school, unfortunately, we didn't really get to do wrestling because I don't know what the detail was, but somebody fucked up in school. And I was one of gym has lots of phys ed has lots of really stupid things that you have to do. And two of my regrets from high school is we didn't get to do football or wrestling because whatever.
Yeah. So you didn't do wrestling in high school.
So had I done wrestling, I might have had more of a grappling mentality.
Right.
I mean, it's really hard, I think, for people these days to think about how big of a deal grappling is. It's like in everybody's consciousness. And I think we mentioned this in one of the other things. The first grappling-like thing that really saw. I mean, there's a little bit of things in movies here and there, but like whenever Lethal Weapon was probably around the same time, maybe a little bit later.
87.
That was the first time I saw a thing, but that was like one little move.
Yeah.
Just
the triangle at the end.
Just out there when they had that fight. So you didn't really see a lot of grappling stuff. And the other things were striking, you had Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris. Those were the kind of things that were there. So
one of the weird things, though, if you think about it, because Aikido was actually a transition from the striking arts to a close, standing grappling range.
Yep.
So that was new for the world because it really hadn't seen it. I mean, obviously, jiu-jitsu was around.
And it's kind of an intermediate range too, right? Like people are getting close enough with the weapons. It's far, but it's close too, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not in as close as you are with grappling. I mean,
right.
That's why they've got like the machete and baseball bats and knives and bottles.
So
and
intermediate
cool
range.
Also,
it's
also how to deal with weapons with your bare hands in a way that
which is very
blocking
different
with something else and then punching, right? It was like, how to, use a technique to get around a blade and to get through and, to disarm the guy and then cut the guy up with the machete and how to incorporate this traditional weapons work kind of back into the movies again. Instead of just using a weapon and getting a hold of that weapon, it was, now I can go from no hands to a weapon, drop the weapon, fight the next guy with the bat.
And that was part of the appeal
right?
too. So the realism thing was bringing the weapons and unarmed stuff together rather than
When I started Aikido, I was enamored by it. I loved the joint locks and the wrist locks and the throws and stuff. And but one of the things that I would do in class, and my sensei at the time would call me slippery, was because I liked the resistance, and I wasn't trying to be an ass, by escaping moves. Because a lot of times you just go to it, or you just bow to the, the sensei's technique, and you just kind of ukemi and all that stuff. But I was like, what would happen? Okay, you put me down on the ground. What happens if you roll? What happens if you grab onto the leg? What happens if you keep moving? Because your technique would have to change, right? Mm-hmm. And so in Aikido, the transition from technique to technique is in there, right?
Yeah.
The Japanese word is kaishiwaza for that, or
when you're
or
doing like
heka.
the counter techniques, or the changing techniques,
But so I'm on the ground, and it's like, okay, well, the fight's supposed to be over, but if it isn't, so I'm grabbing and moving, and so Sensei's like, oh, you're slippery, and it's like, well, I kind of want to see what happens. And so that's where the seed was planted for me about what's grappling, what happens if it goes on the ground, and what happens if you bring someone down here. And then the UFC comes out in '93.
Yeah.
Which I saw, but I continued to do.
Yeah.
I continued to do Aikido, of course, and it wasn't until later on that I took on.
Yeah, and so the 93, so that was a changer there. But you've got from 88 to 93, and then it did take a while for UFC to
it took years.
Take off. Just because it came in 93. I mean, I don't know exactly what year it got really popular, but you've got a good chunk there where Aikido was very popular.
Yeah.
And the grappling stuff wasn't. Now, also for us when we were doing it, I mean, I was doing Aikido as some of the movies were coming out, which was really cool, and Sensei was very cool. So we would do things. We would go see the movie.
Yeah.
And then the next class, you'd go, okay,
let's do this.
I'll show you the thing that was in this scene because you're there and you're watching the movie like, oh wait, we did that. We did something like that. Oh, it's like, what was this? That was part of the fun was going and seeing like, oh wait, we did that in class, or oh, could you teach us that?
So I should preface right now. So. Jason is a 4th degree black belt in Aikido, but he's also a purple belt in BJJ. So he does know both worlds. And Alex is soon to be a purple belt in BJJ as well. So Alex, what's your kind of take on looking at Aikido years past the heyday of it and its value? What do you see any value in it?
For sure, I absolutely do, and I think that especially doing the Japanese jiu-jitsu and what I really appreciate about Aikido is the movement and the extension that happens, right? Because especially for me, that's one of my more difficult things that I'm trying to incorporate into my martial arts is that extension and that flow. Because in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if you leave an arm out, it gets broken. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's that. There's a certain amount of that comes with it, but it's inherently an easier martial art to play defensively, to keep everything tight and then have a game from there. And it works very well in that way, as opposed to Aikido, you have to open up and extend in order to achieve certain moves.
And I remember first starting BJJ, the extending arms is like really awesome, but get arm barred and triangled a whole bunch from having the arm.
Don't do that.
Having the arm extension,
tight.
but it's different when you're trying to defend against knives and stuff like that. Keeping your arms in tight is not a healthy, useful thing to be doing.
The distance management, the entering in Aikido, I think is incredible, and you can't put a value on when someone is coming at you with the intent to strike, to kill. And that's the other thing too, is when you're practicing, like, you don't get to change the direction of the punch or the swing, right? There's a certain amount that you can redirect, but it's still basically coming in on that 45 or whatever it is, right? And you can make that adaptation, but there's a certain amount that you can't get in almost, it doesn't focus in any other martial art the same way that Aikido focuses on using that momentum to destroy your opponent as they're coming in on you, right?
But so the argument being is, are you really going to be able to destroy your opponent with Aikido?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I've seen some pretty cool footage of Jason destroying some opponents. So, I would say that, yeah, I think that, it comes down to, I think Aikido really capitalizes on the timing as well, right? It's a big part of it. You can't come in with a technique and try and, do an omote when you need to do an ura, right? You can't push through when you need to step away and to turn with it, right? And I think that's another thing that Aikido does very well, is a lot of the ura techniques is taking your opponent's energy and turning it and redirecting it. I think there's lots of very applicable.
And I think that is misunderstood because people are like, oh, energy against him. What does that really mean?
Yeah, and it sounds kind of flaky, but
We're not talking about ki. We're not talking about like your spirit powers.
But BJJ does that.
Yeah, but that's
right.
just what the point I was going to make is when you see really high level people in BJJ, they're flowing and they're turning and they're blending with the energy and stuff like that. It's just, they don't have the layer of whatever about it that gets.
So one of the things I look at Aikido, like for me, my Aikido, when I went into Jiu-Jitsu and BJJ, it changed.
Yeah.
Because of the range and just how I appreciate it. So my Aikido, I left it behind, but it did change, and I have incorporated Jiu-Jitsu, I've incorporated Aikido moves into my BJJ.
Yeah.
And it works. But does it all work? No, it certainly doesn't.
Things don't work all the time. It's the right tool for the right job at the right time.
Right.
I often tell people, you can have a technique that's a 1% technique, and if you use it that 1% of the time that's appropriate, it's a 100% technique. You have a 99% effective technique, if there was such a thing, and you use it the 1% of the time it doesn't work, it's a 0% technique. So a lot of it is right tool for the right job at the right time.
And that's one of the main arguments of BJJ is the percentage of moves that work are much higher than, and I'm not trying to rag on Aikido necessarily, but they are much higher.
Yeah, and it's also like how quickly can you get someone up to a level of competence within a thing,
20-year techniques.
Right, you can get into the longbow, crossbow,
right?
firearm type of arguments too with other types of weapons.
And one of the things they talk about BJJ is the gross motor skills. It is much quicker, I believe, to catch on to it, although it does seem alien when you first start.
Well, but it becomes more inherent, and it builds in them. And for me, I find the learning curve for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu far, I don't want to necessarily, I guess, easier than the advanced Aikido and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu techniques. When you look at the subtleties, when you look at the difference that 1 degree of rotation in a wrist or an elbow can make when in that stand-up kind of 3-dimensional aspect, as opposed to down on the 2-dimensional aspect of BJJ, like I'm finding in BJJ, like, oh, you can get a Kimura from here, you can get a Kimura from here, like it just kind of happens.
Yeah.
It's far like, oh, this, once you kind of find that concept, it applies in most of the positions. Like, there's a certain way to achieve that move. Standing up, it's like I have no idea how to get from here to here. Like you got the transition through 8 different moves before you end up back at the same spot.
But it also depends where you're coming from too.
Right.
Like coming from stand up to going to BJJ later.
Yeah.
I had the opposite problem.
Right.
Which is what the plane which you're operating
the
on.
plane, which I mentioned before when we were talking about Star Trek, right? About the 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional thinking of when we're talking about the Khan battle and in the nebula, because like being able to have your feet do more than just move along on the ground was like, it's still a thing that catches me up against people that have a better sense of that.
And what I typically tell people, it's like, well, what's the difference between, say, maybe Japanese Jiu-Jitsu or Aikido and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? And since I have my feet in both worlds, I basically say that, and this is a gross oversimplification of it, is if you think that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu works on the lateral plane, horizontal plane, that's where it operates. So when you have the ground on your back or whatever, you know that you can't move past that.
Yeah.
So your mobility, you know that you can use it for grounding and movement and base and structure and things like that. However, when you look at it in stand-up arts and traditional arts, you're now working on a vertical plane. So your movement, as Jason was pointing out, is much different. We can move in circles.
Yes.
We can move in and out much quicker. So it's just a difference of planes. And once you kind of understand that, the techniques are similar in some ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? And that's that old adage, it's like many roads to the peak, but once you get to the peak, they're kind of very similar.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I think, Alex, you make some good points, looking at it from kind of a BJJ perspective coming in from that. But
And I also have to say too, there's a big, I think, and this is another thing I want to say about Steven Seagal, right? Is obviously when he's doing that and when he's showing these people and when he's making Aikido popular and famous, he's doing it with opponents who it's almost like a choreographed rehearsal type thing, right? I'm going to do this move, then we're going to do this move, then we're going to do that move to make him look badass.
Of course.
Now the problem is that people then they want to learn how to do that.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
are those people wanting to learn how to fuck people up and defend themselves? Or are they wanting to learn how to do a cool thing like, hey, let's make this look cool? And this is where I think karate fell victim to the same thing, right? In a different way. Karate, I think, fell victim to the rec center karate. Like your kids, you put them in karate and they get a black belt in like 5 years or something, and they're like they get their junior black belt or whatever it is, and they get a stripe every day they go to class, and it's the McDojo type thing. It's a money making thing. I don't agree with that, right? But it's a tough line to walk because you need to fund the martial arts practice, but then you also need to not dilute it with a bunch of shit that you're just selling. And I think Aikido, a lot of places fell into that selling shit and make this look cool and popular, and this is how you kind of
well, it's funny. It's I don't know if I'd say that because when it changed, like when Jason and I were going through it, it took 10 years to get a black belt in Aikido.
Yeah.
Right? Just like BJJ.
Yeah.
It's different now, but like it took a long time to get a black belt. It wasn't. It was like, oh my god.
And they don't belt you up. Like I mean, I'm not trying to say that karate and Aikido did it in the same way. What I'm saying is that they both fell victim to selling it.
Oh, I see.
Whereas Aikido, and they sold you the fanciness of the move and like how crazy it looked when you were throwing a guy down. The beauty and the flow of it.
But we know the reality of what happens.
Is far like he's not getting out. It's different, right?
It's
and
got
how he's falling, what's happening. If you practice falling like that, how are you going to know what it's like to throw someone when they have no idea how to even
that's
be thrown?
Part of the challenges of Aikido is like there's any martial art when you popularize it. I mean, like we say, it's like you get an action hero of the month, year, whatever that comes out, and everyone's trying to be like them.
Right.
And then it gets popular, and other people want to jump on the bandwagon and get in there, and then you're trying to run it as a business and attract more people. Then compromises get made. This isn't BJJ's got its own things, but one of the things in Aikido is people trying to do the falls and make it look beautiful and do that. So there's like sort of demo techniques that are really impressive to do in a demonstration that are beautiful and flowing and make nice big falls. And then you can sit there and you can preach about the art of peace and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you can take those techniques, tighten them up a little bit, and throw someone who doesn't know how to fall, and it won't be flowing and it won't be pretty, but it will be effective, and the person is not going to make a nice fall, but it will definitely fuck them up.
You have used
I have used Aikido in the real world, and it will.
I didn't believe it till I saw it. I was like, this is like the Suruminage. That's one of my weakest moves that I struggle with. But man, I need to tighten that shit up because I've seen it work. Like it's impressive.
So
right?
It can work, and that's part of the struggle that Aikido has is they've got this thing about being, we're going to be the art of peace,
right?
And within the Aikido community, there's some people that hate Steven Seagal because like, it's too violent. It's not true Aikido because it's too violent, and then there's other people that are like, I'm more on the effectiveness side than on the pretty boy side.
Well, they discuss when you're looking at the violence of Aikido, it's sometimes referred to as pre-war Aikido and post-war Aikido, where Sensei kind of changed his demeanor and the love of martial art and stuff like that. And
if I want to keep doing this, I need to change it because they're going to crack down on me.
And the funny thing is, we're talking about using, like if you're using Aikido in the real world, obviously, as we've already pointed out, not all techniques work all the time in all people. We're also not talking about using them on trained fighters. We're not talking about an MMA guy versus an Aikido guy or a BJJ guy. We're not talking about that.
When you put gloves on, it makes a lot of wrist locks and things like that.
But even if you don't,
right?
even if it isn't straight, right? If a trained fighter in one art versus another trained practitioner in another art, there's going to be an imbalance there.
Yeah.
And the reality is, and this is my opinion, and this is something that I had to learn, was I needed to go back to the drawing board. Right, when I was already a black belt in Aikido when I started BJJ and Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and I was like, hey, I just need to start learning. I have a massive hole here, and then I just the art itself taught me stuff that Aikido never taught me.
Yeah,
and honestly, I'm more confident because of my BJJ
for sure
than my Aikido, for sure.
Like if you're saying if there was a way to kind of just have one, the BJJ would be a much more complete.
Yeah. But I don't regret doing Aikido at all because it taught me a lot of stuff about the martial arts, about movement, about distance, about my own body.
And that's a lot of high level difficult stuff.
Yeah, it's the nuances of a martial art. And if you talk to any black belt in BJJ, they're also going to have that same kind of similarity, and they'll talk about it. Like when you talk to a martial artist, no matter what art they're in, if they're high level, you speak the same language.
Yes, yeah.
And that's the important stuff. So there's stuff I took from Aikido, which I absolutely love. And people bash on it, and I don't get into, there's things I don't like about it and things I think are bullshit. 100%.
Yeah.
Which is going to lead us into Dane's dungeon in a moment. But my point being is there's techniques that do work or that are beneficial to your martial art training no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So to discount it, if you've never done it, I think is the height of ignorance. To believe that everything's going to work in it is the height of ignorance as well, right? So make no mistake, listening audience, I'm not saying that it is the end-all, cure-all. It isn't. Neither is BJJ.
No.
But that's why I do what I do. That's why I train in multiple disciplines.
Yeah, they each have something to offer.
They totally do.
There's different points in your life where you'll be looking for different things, and maybe one martial art speaks to you at one point in your life, another point something else is going to work. And if one martial art was better than all the rest, then it would eliminate it, and there wouldn't be others. They serve different purposes for different people at different times.
And the funny thing is what is best, right?
Yeah, what is best?
It depends on what you
want. Are we going to go take ninjutsu because killing someone in their sleep is way easier than killing someone when they're awake? You know what I mean? Like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to assassinate someone, or are you trying
that's the best way to kill someone.
Exactly, right? Poison them? Like, are we going to do chemistry?
Right?
Like, there's all those kind of things. So it just depends on what you're looking for. But I think in terms of martial arts, you're looking at defending yourself from an unprepared situation, and I think that Aikido, especially with a lot of the traditional weapon stuff, translates very well in a lot of if you can make the adaptation too. That's the thing. If you can take the yokomen and the shomen and turn it into a jab or a cross, or you can turn these traditional attacks and you can adjust them to a more modern
And you're seeing that now. You're seeing actually Aikido practitioners who are coming into the 21st century that are actually starting to morph the art, and it's pissing a lot of traditionalists off because they're like, okay, this doesn't work, let's get rid of this, let's kind of add this. And you can argue that it's not Aikido anymore, which is fine, but
how do you think Aikido got to where it was? Like some guy was
people
running
have
around,
to be innovating.
it's always changing, it's always growing.
It is, but I'm going to take Aikido as specifically, but it can be any kind of traditional martial art. BJJ is very much not like this because it's super, there's so many different practitioners and they evolved and changing and adding all the time.
They tried to fight it, but Eddie Bravo really broke that mold, I think.
Yeah, Eddie totally broke that mold. But you see a ton of American practitioners doing it, and even Brazilian guys too. But Aikido especially was kind of like, this is how we do it. And Jason and I can speak hours about this. This is how you do it. It doesn't change. No, this is how the founder meant it to be. So the problem is O-sensei, he had several different students.
Right.
And they each interpreted his teaching differently. So when you look at all his main students, like when it comes down the line, each one is very different.
Yeah, and if you see the different things that were taught at different periods of time.
It's like religion, it's like how many different Christianities are there or whatever.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, well, actually, I don't do this on this day. Well, I want to do that, so.
So that's going to transition into this segment of the Torvus podcast of Dane's Dungeon. Dane being our very good friend who passed away. We are dedicating this spot to him. We're going to raise a glass, have a drink to Dane. To Dane. Yes, we talk about particular things about movies or whatever topic we're talking about, and we either say that it's cool shit or total bullshit. So I'm just going to start with, I'm going to see if you think this is cool shit or bullshit. In Russia, which we didn't even talk about with Steven Seagal. He happens to be a Russian citizen as well, but that is a completely different topic.
Not Tibetan?
And he is also, yes, he said he was a reincarnated Tuklu, which basically a Tuklu is the reincarnated Dalai Lama.
He also has a humanitarian award from PETA as well. So PETA's on his side. He's a PETA Putin Tibetan.
And he actually did a movie called Fire Down Below, which was like oils and stuff. Like he's been all over the place, right? Oh my God. Okay,
That was a turning point in it.
In Russia, here we go. The bootleg translation of Above the Law became Nico. And I was mentioning before, Nico was the name used in many different places, and so that's what happened, which is fine. But for some reason, bootleggers started titling the following Steven Seagal films as Nico 2, Nico 3, and Nico 4.
And to be fair, I think that his character in the first 4 movies,
but it's like
and
cop.
he's not a great actor, but for playing a cop martial arts action hero,
Yeah,
he's great.
He's always a cop, right?
In those 4 movies, he's a good character that does it right. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger's not a great actor either, but he can still play good roles.
Okay, so do we think that Steven Seagal's characters, say in the first 4 films, is cool shit or bullshit?
It's a cool shit, kick-ass cop.
It's cool. It's cool. Like it's not necessarily super politically correct, but it's an interesting take on it for sure.
But I guess that it doesn't matter because we're not watching the story, so we don't really care.
It's like
it's cool.
It's not great acting. It's not great story, but it's a good kick-ass cop.
Okay. The films following the first 4 Steven Seagal films, cool shit or bullshit?
The one on the battleship Under Siege was cool shit, but then after that,
Bullshit.
I have
Have
less
you seen some of them?
I when I was
Straight to
I was
video?
doing a little research, the straight to video ones. He got the, what are they called, the Raspberry Awards, the golden or the
Oh, those are the worst film
yeah,
awards?
the worst things.
He won best director, worst director. He was nominated for so many in all of his straight to film movies. I was looking at it because I was like, oh, did he get any awards? And it's all just for shit awards.
I think there was a turning point. But I mean, Above the Law, I don't know the numbers, but it did pretty well. I don't know how well, but it definitely made money and was like in the theaters and stuff. But the later ones were just. Ugh.
So, okay, the next one is apparently after the film opened, let's see if this is a cool shit or bullshit moment. Aikido experienced a boom worldwide. And Steven Seagal's Los Angeles dojo at the time was struggling. But afterwards, after the movie came out, it was sold out and every single class was full. Cool shit or bullshit?
I think that's cool shit.
That's cool shit, yeah.
You're getting a lot of people into martial arts, and some people stayed in Aikido and it was a great thing. Some people stayed for a while and left. Some people moved on to other things. I think, anytime you're giving people an opportunity to do something else that's interesting to them, that's good. You expose the world to something new that a lot of people got stuff out of and still do.
Gotcha.
Cool shit.
Okay. How about... Oh, by the way, we didn't even touch upon this, but Sharon Stone, she was the wife of Steven Seagal.
Bullshit. Like, I didn't know that's who it is. Like,
That's who it is.
I was
Sharon Stone.
watching the thing and like, whoa, this is like bad. Like,
Sharon
she's not a
Stone.
good character.
No.
Maybe it was horribly written, but that wasn't good acting. It's just like no chemistry. It was just like
It was terrible.
It was like that was horrible. Bullshit.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's her fault, but as it came across on the screen, bullshit.
Okay, so we're going to talk about one of the deaths in Above the Law. And that's when one of the bad guys ends up, it's in the car park.
Yeah.
And
he's on the hood and he says, stop the car, stop the car, stop it now. And then he drives and he goes kind of out a window that's low. It's partly wall, part window. And he just drives the car straight through it, hangs out over
was
the
it
building.
the same guy that he put his hand through the side and was choking? Was it the same guy that was saying,
Yes.
stop the car?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's actually a pretty good writing thing.
It is, yeah. Stop
No,
the car,
seriously,
stop
like,
the
I mean,
car, you
in
motherfucker.
literary composition, the fact that the guy earlier in the thing was stop the car when he was choking him, and then he ends his life by saying stop the car, that you've got the structure
Oh,
of the
I see.
narrator.
Yeah.
So I was just
never
saying it
saw
had
that.
bad writing, but that's actually a perfectly valid literary device.
Fantastic. I never even thought about that. So, but he crashes him through the window and he bounces and then he falls onto the train tracks.
Yeah, so he smashes him through the window and he's kind of on the hood of the car. And then when the
So
car
right as-
stops with the tires hanging out of the window, and then he slides off the hood.
Which is as he slides off the hood, this is where the special effects guys
Yeah, he's
really
a dummy.
drop the ball.
Yeah,
You
he's
can
a
totally
super
see
dummy.
it's
The
a
dummy?
dummy,
The dummy.
and then they cut away from the dummy, and then it's the guy falling with his arms flailing. Like the
Yeah,
dummy thing looked
yeah.
really
It was-
bad.
that was
Really
the
bad.
only
That
time
was
I
like, dude,
"Ooh."
you got to recut that. That was shit.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
Yeah, and
Bullshit,
then
I
anyway,
agree.
he flies out the window down, and he falls onto a set of train tracks, hits the third rail, and just like you could just see, and like the blue sparks going everywhere.
Like
he just,
overkill.
he just got exploded. Like it was
But
like, oh my goodness.
They could have had the train run over him. I mean, you get it was also very Wile E. Coyote too, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh my goodness. It's totally good. Another fight sequence in there at the very end when he grabs Henry Silva and he takes Henry Silva's arm and he breaks his arm.
So cool. I was watching that and I was like, oh, like even for the special effects and what it was. And,
Yeah.
and then he proceeds to wrap around his head
And then he
break
breaks-
his neck.
Yeah.
It was so cool. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
yeah,
So cool shit.
cool shit.
Yeah.
I think I may have taught something similar.
Yeah.
Recently.
So yeah, I would say that's a pretty cool death scene. So that's cool shit. Because it was pretty graphic, right? After he breaks it
Yeah.
and then it just
Well, he broke his nose first, and he's all bleeding. Oh, and then he grabs the arm, breaks the arm, and it's kind of slow. Like it's not a quick. It's not like a.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
you could see like
Yeah,
yeah.
and
He was kind of making him suffer.
yeah, and then he
Suffer there.
goes for the head wrap,
And that's actually one of the.
it's very cool.
Just so I don't forget it, since we're on YouTube, there's two entertaining videos about Steven Seagal breaking bones or breaking all the bones or something. And
yes.
you know, even if you don't like his movies and you can't sit through a whole movie and stuff, they're like, I don't know, it's like 10 minutes of just like there's a lot of different bone breaking.
That is a great video.
Which is just one of those things. I mean, you definitely don't want to do that as a drinking game unless you got someone you want to get them just completely hammered. That's like playing the fuck game with Scarface.
It's totally true though. Like it's like hundreds of breaking bones, and it's just one after that. Have you seen it? The
No,
compilation.
no.
It's really funny.
Oh, that's hilarious.
yeah.
I'll have to
And
watch it.
all it
We'll
does,
watch it afterward.
all it does is just shows like 1, 2, 3, and it's like snap, snap,
And
snap.
that was something very characteristic to him that he brought there. Like when you think in the other martial arts movies, that kind of gratuitous bone breaking wasn't there. He brought that to the scene.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to talk. The next one we're going to talk about for Dane's Dungeon here, and the last one is Steven Seagal's hair. Cool shit or bullshit? And the reason I'm bringing this up, Alex, because you just looked up in the air, and go, what is he talking about? Steven Seagal, you know he wears a hairpiece, right?
Like now, like nowadays, or?
Like now.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
You can tell it's not real.
Yes.
I did not know, but I don't really follow what he does anymore. So
Oh, well, he's always wearing like kind of this like a handkerchief on his head.
Yeah.
But Steven Seagal's hair.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a picture of Steven Seagal back when he did Above Law, and then I'm going to show you a picture of today. You ready?
Yeah.
So I just showed you guys the pictures of Above the Law back then and now. So is that cool shit or bullshit?
That's super bullshit.
Bullshit. And Alex points out, he's like, why does he always have like yellow shooting glasses on?
It's always. It's a weird dude. He's a weird guy. Like,
he totally is. And that's the other thing we never even touched upon, which we have to end off on. You ready?
Yeah.
Ready.
Cool shit or bullshit? Here it goes. The ponytail.
The ponytail at the time was cool shit.
Did you have one, Jason?
I had really long hair and sometimes was in a ponytail. My hair was not as I have much bushier hair, so my hair does
I'm
not
also
go,
gonna say
not
cool
go
shit.
as
Yeah.
slick. And the thing too, you got to remember with his character in these first 4 movies too, they always have this like Italian mafia family connection. He's a cop, but he's also got a family that's got close ties with the Catholic Church and the mafia.
mafia.
Yeah.
And so you got to have
Always.
that slicked back.
Yeah.
Also,
kind of
I like
hair to be
the
the
tie
cool.
to the Japanese. You know, it's like kind of like a warrior's like top knot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's the same kind of like long hair tied up. Like, you
But
know.
it's kind of like a North American
Version,
top knot
yeah.
of the thing. And you got to remember too, like, I don't know the exact timeline, but it's an actual, not an Above the Law, but the later movies, his hair grows a little bit more and gets more into it. But there's also like the new wave motion, so it's not like a rat tail, which is bullshit.
Right.
This is a ponytail, which is cool shit for the thing there too.
I had the ponytail.
So, if you're gonna do it, you gotta embrace it.
In 1990, I went as Halloween. I was Steven Seagal.
Really?
Yes, I have a
Do you
picture.
have photos?
I have a picture.
Awesome.
of it.
God,
and if I can find it, I will throw it on the podcast so people can see it.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
ridiculous. I dyed my hair black, and it was the pony. Oh my goodness.
That's hilarious.
See, that's why
You
it's
should do that now. You should go as Steven Seagal now, like his current day. You should dress up like him, and
with
then you
like
can get-
overweight.
and with the
with
shooting
hairpiece.
glasses on and the hairpiece. Yeah, we could get like a Sharpie and like draw the V on your forehead.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you know
could
the internet's forever now, right? So if I ever do that, we're done. Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah, the things you could get away with as a kid before the internet.
Yeah, a lot of people say, "Thank God the internet didn't exist when I was a teenager." Right?
Yeah,
You don't have that luxury,
don't have
Alex.
that, no.
Yeah.
and with his hair and stuff, I don't remember specifically, but I think he wasn't like a super sex star thing. But I think to the women he was like okay
he
back
was.
then. Like
No,
people make
he
fun
was
of
a
him
sex
now,
symbol.
but he was.
Oh yeah. Yeah, huge, tall, dark, and handsome. They loved him. He was like on.
you know?
He was on GQ. Oh yeah.
So this is one of the things that was like people nowadays wouldn't think of him that way, and to me, I didn't really care, but I have a recollection
that's good because he showed that photo and he's got like pretty thinning hair in his breakout roles and stuff. It's not. I wouldn't say there's anything to write home about, but.
Well, you're not attracted
Yeah,
to the
just mentioning it for-
CIA mafia.
He's
guy.
no Chris Hemsworth, let me tell you that.
We do like Chris Hemsworth.
well, it depends which part of which movie you're talking about.
All of them, any of them.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Even Fat Thor
it's
was
all
awesome.
good, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, that was our take on Aikido, Above the Law, and Steven Seagal. Kind of a weird topic, but we know we have some ties in that world, so we just had to talk about it.
It is kind of a weird thing, but I mean, again, if you like cop action movies, the first 4, you might fast forward through some parts, but there's some good fight scenes in there, and they're not the best ever, but there's worse modern things that are out there that I've seen. I wouldn't watch anything after
Under Siege.
Under Siege.
Yeah.
But
if you're going to watch any of, watch the first 2 minutes of Above the Law and fast forward to the fight scenes because they're kind of cool. It is, I think, required viewing for 80s geeks.
Yeah, and some of the other ones, like the next few movies, and again, like I say, it's basically the same character, but he's got the one against the Jamaican posse and stuff. That had some great fight scenes in it. If you want just sheer brutality, beat down, the Out for Justice, the 4th one.
That was good.
That's kind of the peak of bully cop guy.
Oh, yeah.
Just mopping the floor and walls and ceiling with people.
Yes.
So
for the record, we don't do that.
No, but it's again, I'm saying this coming from like the Dirty Harry type of thing. Or
totally.
If I've got a sort of sub-degree in cop things, there's also a good thing from Britain called Life on Mars, and they did an American one, but the British one's always a lot better. But it also shows the cops in the 70s and stuff like that. So it's a very different era when you're coming from, and then you're doing it up for action movies. So whatever. It's like, right time for the right mood, right? That's not greatest stuff ever, but it's not as bad. The other stuff is really fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Really fucking horrible. But sometimes early things can still be okay.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And if it holds up against over the generations,
Yeah.
and it wasn't the worst thing ever, then
Yep.
maybe you can get surprises from.
It was interesting getting Alex's perspective of going backwards rather than going forwards.
Yeah, and it's, overall, I would have probably written him off as a lunatic and said that maybe the world would be better without him. But, I think he's done a lot of great things, and I think, it's unfortunate that he went down the path that he did, but, and art is art, and you got to appreciate what he did at the time when he did it, right?
Right, and I guess I don't really care about celebrities. I don't give a fuck about that stuff. I watch movies to see characters in movies. I don't care about actors, celebrities, producers, all that shit. I'm into it for the
But
characters.
you know that when you have
in the,
PETA and Putin like helping you out,
Maybe
something's going on.
It's
Maybe
funny
there's
when I put this together and we're talking about PETA and Putin.
Yeah.
Every time we say PETA and Putin, I'm gonna have the PETA symbol,
Yeah.
and then when we say Putin, Putin's face is gonna come up. It's just gonna go back and forth because it's so weird.
Yeah.
Man. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. Really appreciate going down memory lane with Steven Seagal, Above the Law, and Aikido. So until next time, this was episode 7 of the Torvus podcast.